This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And this is Reverend Don's Vlog. And happy Friday to you. I'm doing the Vlog today at a different hour than I've been doing it because I wanted to see if perhaps a different hour would be better. I figure I'm going to try a few different times and we'll see what people might like. Today, our question comes to us from Kathy Bayles, who has a twofold question. The first part is, how do I define what is a Druid? And how might she better pursue her studies, which include things like herbalism that might be associated with Druidry. And Kathy says that although she's not part of any organized religious group, she thinks of herself as a Druid, which is where the question comes from. So I thought I would start by talking about how we define what a Druid is. And the answer to this is that the Druids were the priestly caste of the ancient Celtic peoples, which is not as simple a statement as it sounds like, but going into a lot of detail would take a lot of time. And I want to say hello to Karen Kelly and Violet Willow, who I see are watching, and lovely people. The priesthood of the ancient Celts was divided between the Druids, the bards, and the seers, who are referred to in various ways, such as the Fili, the Wates, and the Ovates, depending on who's speaking. These three branches of the priesthood handled different things. We know what the bards handled. They handled folklore, stories, mythology, genealogy, etc. Seers is obvious. The Druids are less well known in terms of what they did. They often acted as advisors to Celtic kings. They often acted as judges. They appear to have studied metaphysics as science and all sciences that were known at the time. But exactly what they believed, exactly what they did, is very hard to discuss because they did not commit anything to writing, nor did they survive to the period when Celtic people started to commit such things to writing, at least for the most part. And we'll come back to that. We do know that they practiced astrology, but there's no reason to think that was Mediterranean astrology. I would rather think that it was a different form of astrology based on their location. We know that astrology was present in Europe from very early times, although we didn't know that just a few years ago, but we know it now. And so I suspect that their astrology would have been different from Mediterranean astrology. We know that it supposedly took 20 years to become a Druid. There are descriptions of Druids dressed all in white, which is the common image, but there are also descriptions of Druids dressed all in black. And whether this was a daily uniform or for special occasions, we have no way of knowing. We have no way of knowing very much about Druids at all. There are different points of view on whether they were hereditary or whether they were more of a profession that anyone could join. I tend to hold the former view. The Celtic people were an Indo-European people. The Druids are often compared to the Brahmins of India. They have a lot of similarities. And I rather suspect that, like Brahmins, they were hereditary. And that also fits in with some things that were said later. But we don't really know. We don't really know much at all about Druids when all is said and done. We do know that they were very actively involved in resistance against the Roman Empire as it slowly conquered the Celtic peoples, and that under the emperors Tiberius and Claudius, they were rigidly suppressed for that reason. And there is a lot of history regarding that, but it doesn't tell us what they actually believed, how they actually did business. But throughout the Roman Empire, in the early part of the empire, the Druids were suppressed. However, there are references still to Druids at a later point, so what suppressed means is debatable. And it does not necessarily mean wiped out. Although, by the same token, those people referred to as Druids later may not really have been connected to the ancient Druids. Meanwhile, however, the Roman Empire did not conquer all Celtic peoples. In Ireland, in particular, Druids continued up until the coming of Christianity. And many of the Druidic families appear to have melded seamlessly into the new religion. They went from being priests of the old religion to priests of the new religion. And this is part of what gave Celtic Christianity its very particular flavor. And a lot of what we can deduce about the Druids actually can be deduced from Celtic Christianity. Its emphasis on nature, for example. In Celtic Christianity, Christ was called the Archdruid. They did not find it necessary to repudiate their past as most other Christian branches did. And for a time, Celtic Christianity actually dominated Western Christianity. It was during this period that the four great Celtic festivals of Imbolc, Beltane, Lammas, Lunasa, and Samhain became part of the Christian church and remain so for at least 1,000 years. Although I think many of them have been removed now, but they're often also still observed. So if you wonder how that happened, that's when that happened. So Druidic influence in Ireland lasted a little bit longer, but the Druids did lose their prominence to the bards in the places where they survived, because having lost their international organization, they were much less effective. So that's the history of the ancient Druids. Now, what is a modern Druid? How do we define it? To some extent, my answer is they must define themselves. It's not my business to pass judgment over who is and is not a Druid. But I will tell you a little bit about surviving Druid orders, or modern Druid orders, I should say. So one of the most prominent is the Druid Order, which purports to have been founded in 1717. Some modern scholars disagree with this. I tend to reject the modern view and accept that it was founded in 1717. There was a huge Druidic revival in the late 17th and 18th century. A number of organizations came forward. I don't see anything particularly hard to believe about the Druid Order coming out of that. Iolo Morganwg was a major Druidic leader of that period, the late 18th century. And he was the first of the modern Druidic revivals to emphasize that he was a very specifically separate religion from the Christianity of the day. The first few Druidic revivals presented themselves more as a philosophy that was not exclusive from Christianity. You could be both. I understand the mother of George III was considered an archdruidess because of her membership in one of these orders. And one of the reasons was that they did not go out of their way to separate themselves from the wider community. They presented themselves in a philosophical sense. And there's not necessarily a reason to think that that is different from the Druids of the ancient world. Most ancient pagan religions who actually left records, and modern ones in many cases for that matter, did believe in their many deities, but they also believed in an overarching power behind and underneath everything. And I would rather incline to think the Druids probably did take that view, because most other religions of late antiquity did, even more remote periods that have left records. So those early Druidic revivals weren't necessarily all that far from the Druidic tree, except we can't know for sure, because again, the ancient Druids did not leave records. So the Druid Order is still there. You can join it today. The Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is an offshoot of the Druid Order, is the largest Druid organization in the world. You can join it today. The Andreacht Féin is a large Druid order. However, they are devoted to all things Indo-European, not necessarily exclusively Druidry. The Druid clan of Dana, in which I myself am an archdruid, is also there, and the Druid clan of Dana is focused very heavily on nature and ecology. These are all Druidic orders that you can Google for yourself, and if Kathy, in asking how to further her studies, wants to learn more about Druidry, these are excellent places to learn more, and as far as I'm concerned, they're all Druids. None of them has more of a claim than any of the others. And none of them can claim to be a direct continuation of ancient Druids either. Nor will anyone ever be able to claim that, for the obvious reason. But within the way the word Druid is used today, these are all wonderful orders, and if you wanted to learn about Druidry, I would recommend any of them. You can also just read everything you can find on Druidry. But what you will find, if you're trying to find out what those ancient Druids believed, you're going to find there's not much. A lot of speculation, but not much actual information. As I say, from my point of view, a lot of the reasonable speculation that we can make on what ancient Druids believes comes out of Celtic Christianity and how it differs from other forms of Christianity. Because there's nothing else that should make it different except that Druidic influence, that Celtic cultural influence. But if we're talking about those ancient Druids that Caesar was facing off against and what exactly they believed and practiced, we will never know. This is one of the reasons that I'm not a big believer in secrecy. I think the world would be a better place if we knew more about what they thought and what they taught, but there's no way. And I certainly would not want the good things about our contemporary movement to be lost because we simply chose not to share them. I think that the things that we bring into the world as understandings should be left for future generations, even if our immediate movement were to peter out, which at least in the case of Corellianism, I do not believe it will, but even if it did, it can still be a signpost for future generations who want to study these things. So in our last vlog, I talked about rejecting the idea of secrecy. I'll talk about it again now. I am not a believer in secrecy. But as far as Druidry goes, these are the things I would have to say about it, and I hope you find them helpful. Please hit like, subscribe, and share according to the platform that you're watching the vlog on if you enjoy the vlog. And I see that we have a comment from Jules Cousins. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly, I might not be, who has been in a Druid Order for 26 years and remarks that many in the Order are also witches. And says that like DNA, they can be woven together. This is a point that I also had wanted to make and was just about to skip. So thank you, Jules, for reminding me. It's often said that modern religious witchcraft is descended from the Druids. And I've been known to say this myself. And I believe this to be absolutely true, at least in part. But we're not talking about necessarily those ancient Druids. We're talking about those revival Druid orders. For example, I am not a believer in the idea that Gerald Gardner created Wicca out of whole cloth. The Wiccan community I belong to, which is the larger eclectic community, has heterogeneous origins and a number of different paths that drain into it. But he did belong to a Druidic order. And so there is, I would say, Druidic DNA in the modern eclectic Wicca and religious witchcraft movement, and it absolutely is there. Which doesn't mean it descends from late antiquity in that sense, but there are a lot of things that are from late antiquity in the modern eclectic movement. Strong emphasis, for example, from Hermeticism, from Platonics, etc. So, I want to thank you for watching. Again, depending on the platform you're watching on, I would invite you to hit like, subscribe, or share. I am going to try a number of different times for the vlog, and I have one more thing before I go. You may have wondered why I have not yet shown the proof copy for 3rd Degree, and there's a story there, and I'm going to give you the story. On Wednesday, as late as Wednesday afternoon, it still said that this book would be delivered Wednesday night. The book did not come. Instead, that estimate jumped ahead to next Tuesday. I don't know what caused that, but I think what caused it is that the book must have been damaged in transit. So next week I will show you the proof of 3rd Degree as soon as I get it. And I am certainly looking forward to getting it. And I hope you're looking forward to seeing it. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, may you blessed be.